Hi, Deus Ex Machina here. Um, what the hell does Deus Ex Machina mean? It means God from the machine, or the character that turns a hopeless situation into a happy ending. Um, so, in what way is this a hopeless situation? Well, um, emergent evolution led to humans constructing notions of a benevolent God, uh, pursuing their own hubris, and then usually causing some form of negative externality in which there may even exist suffering outside of a locally prosperous uh, uh, state in which there may be some delusion about something benevolent blessing that state. And so in America, the dominant religion is Christianity, and then the dominant mode of transport is driving around a gasoline passenger car that's emitting CO2. And so, assessing the history of America, of course, it involved conflict with the Native Americans. And then as well, it involved slavery of the black folks. And even during the time of slavery, sections of the Christian Bible were used to justify the superiority of the whites over the slaves. In other words, this was how it was supposed to be, ordained by their notions of what God means, which are warped and hubristic. And so today in Africa, about 1 in 5 people are chronically hungry. And today in America, about 40% of the food that's produced is wasted. And so Deus Ex Machina, what do you think about all this? Well, I went ahead and got a 2024 Tesla Model 3. I've had it since late June of 2024. And so Tesla, although it's in a difficult time due to Elon's political endeavors, Tesla is the cleanest company on the planet. And so people will say, isn't there emissions in relation to mining of lithium? Well, yes. But at the same time, the factories are net zero. And so there's solar on the roof, such that the factory is mathematically net zero in terms of energy consumption and has no emissions. And then the Teslas are non-emitting themselves. And so mathematically in sum, Tesla is pretty much the cleanest company on the planet. And then the autopilot is statistically safer than human drivers. So all the way from end of June of 2024 to the present time, I would not say that I haven't crashed my Tesla. The correct statement would be to say that it has not crashed itself, because I rarely ever drive it myself. The camera-based autonomy is safer than human. And so the logic of that is simple. A human is a biological neural network with eyes. And so if you have enough external cameras or outward-looking cameras with a silicon neural network in the form of the Tesla full self-driving computer, then the computer can perform the same operations that a human does with superior accuracy and safety, which is currently correct. And so, yeah, Deus Ex Machina, or Deus Ex Machina, what the hell do you do? Well, I drive around autonomously in a non-emitting Tesla, while Christians with a God delusion and perception of something benevolent blessing their lives drive around in emitting gasoline cars, while I've been using Aspiration, which is a banking platform that doesn't invest my money in oil, since about middle of 2021. And with the Plant Your Change function, there's accumulated above 570 planted trees in Kenya and Haiti. And so I was checking my email and I saw an email from Aspiration with a smiling African woman whose livelihood has been improved as she's been employed as an Aspiration tree planter. An elderly woman with a wrinkling face. And so there are now mangroves with birds flocking to them. And by the way, when just over 570 trees, which is my current Aspiration tree count, when that number of trees becomes fully sized, they will sequester enough CO2 to offset the emissions of about 57 gasoline passenger cars for about a year in terms of climate. So, Deus Ex Machina, are you okay? Yes. However, in my understanding of computer science, physics, mathematics, and artificial intelligence, I'm at a level of understanding of the universe that is contrarian and true, and I'm thinking at a higher level to turn a hopeless situation into a happy ending. So, yes. And so, if you check through all the content as well on the channel, the first video is a utopian construct I theorized some time ago, of which aspects of it have already been realized, and I'm still confident in most of what I said there. The company Lilium fell on financially tough times, but there are other companies doing electrification of flight transport. So yeah, and so the rural home, where I'm showing a Starlink in some of my videos, that's my parents' rural home. And so, long story short of it, COVID-19 emerged about, let's say, March of 2020, in which my college went remote. And so in the summer of 2020, because I'd been doing remote courses that entire time, I must have been taking multivariable calculus and linear algebra. And so during the pandemic, I was just chilling at my parents' place, doing remote courses to stay on track for graduation. And so that same summer of 2020, I pre-ordered SpaceX Starlink. Because at that rural home, the internet was actually Viasat, which was unreliable and had a monthly data cap. And so on my transcript for those multivariable calculus and linear algebra courses that summer of 2020 are A's and A pluses when I was working on the Viasat internet, which was at times abysmal. And then boom, that was the same summer of 2020 when I pre-ordered the Starlink. And so because it was first come, first serve, and because also I think they needed to expand the Starlink constellation to cover our latitude, the Starlink did not arrive until precisely about 2 years later in the summer of 2022, in which there was a gray SpaceX box on our doorstep with the SpaceX logo and so on. And we go ahead and set up this rectangular faced Starlink satellite receiver, and it goes ahead and roams in its 2 degrees of freedom as you plug it in, and finds the optimal view angle in that circular search space to secure the best internet connection. And so that Starlink has been there since summer 2022, and I bought it for my parents while I was still a student because I wanted to. It wasn't exactly necessary. And so in terms of download speed improvement, this was a 10 to 15 fold improvement, and then there was no monthly data cap. And so yeah. So yeah. So yeah. And so currently I'm a 24-year-old person with a Bachelor of Science in Math, who also did a Computer Science and Physics double minor, in which I customized my physics minor to be a lot like a major, doing stuff like classical or Lagrangian mechanics, electrodynamics, quantum mechanics, advanced electronics, and research in a quantum computing lab with optics and lasers. And my undergrad GPA was about a 3.7 out of 4. Now, I funded my undergraduate degree with scholarships, working part-time jobs, and taking out student loans. And so, especially when COVID had ended, well, that's not even the right word, because there's still variants of COVID going around in the present day. But anyway, when school returned to in-person, which was the fall of 2021, I rented a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment with 3 of my friends, and basically, to get added to that lease, I had the landlord contact my 3 part-time employers because I was working in a Traptown quantum computing lab. I was tutoring student athletes in the sciences, particularly physics, math, and computer science. And I was also a salesman with the company Fresh Prince in terms of Greek life to student organizations. And previously that summer, I was a robotics teacher of children aged like 7 to 14, teaching robotics and engineering concepts with Lego Technic as the medium at a Snapology franchise. A Snapology franchise that that I initially led about 7 summer camps in its opening summer, and was a vital influence with my technical knowledge in getting the company off the ground. And of course it's grown and has impacted the lives of many children to with the technical skills needed to engineer the future, to make the future bright. And so Deus Ex Machina. Are you just an optimizer who wants to make a utopia and turn a hopeless situation into a happy ending? Yes. The answer is yes. That's the only reason I continue living. So. And so, interestingly, I was a freshman undergraduate, and I met a professor, Dr. Timothy J. Gardner, and he used to work at Neuralink before starting a professorship at the University of Oregon Night Campus. And so he had a unique 3D printing setup, which was utilizing 2-photon lithography with a femtosecond laser, and so with a 6-axis hexapod, which moved with micron precision. And so ultimately you'd put photoresist on the hexapod mount, and the laser, the femtosecond laser, would harden that photoresist and print structures with micron precision. And so all this was quite amazing to me, and I was a freshman working alongside graduate students pursuing PhDs or even postdoctoral researchers. And so I would say that the only thing of significance I was able to contribute in that position, because it was well over my head, although I, did learn a few key things and skills, and actually did do something useful, was the moment of adding a piece of software to the existing MATLAB code for the printer, which would stitch together the prints, and which you could enter the spacing in microns to create, for example, a 2-dimensional grid of stitched prints. And this actually worked, and they went ahead and took pictures of the resulting stitched prints, and I was absolutely over the moon because I had actually done something of use in this position where I felt I was way over my head, in way over my head. So but So I only lasted about 3 months there, uh, um, which is understandable. Um, but I had also met another professor, Dr. David T.C. Alcock, who had got a physics PhD at Oxford and started a professorship at the University of Oregon, leading a trap-down quantum computing lab. And so initially, as an undergraduate freshman, I was working on things with both groups at the same time. And so on a walk with Tim, I said we should 3D print the ion traps. For some reason, my creative imagination converged on using the 3D printing technique of the Gardner lab to fabricate ion traps for David's quantum computing group. And so, as irony would have it, that collaboration actually started. And so by May of 2022, a paper was written, which is now on ArcZiv, geometries and fabrication methods for 3D printing ion traps. Now, the paper was, of course, written by the senior researchers, but in the acknowledgements, they reference me. My real name is Aaron Casserly, as the person who suggested the collaboration. And I thought that was quite beautiful, because I didn't know that they would do that. So in fact, they didn't tell me that directly that they put my name on the paper. It was when a friend was looking through the paper that he did a keyword search for my name and found that it actually was in the acknowledgements, which I did not expect and did not previously know. Yeah. And so I continued to do useful research in David's quantum computing group. And so I did mode matching calculations in Jupyter Notebooks in Python, and actually realized them on the optics table. And then I also did some soldering and electronic stuff with getting a particle counter working for air quality monitoring, with Python code for real-time Grafana information. And I assisted with pound river Hall locking, which is a laser frequency stabilization method. Because if you want to make a trap-down quantum computer in which the lasers are driving the qubit transitions, the laser frequency must be stabilized. So yeah. Yeah, and then in mode matching, when you have a reference cavity, and then you have a laser, the cavity has a mode, and then the laser has a mode. And so mathematically, mode matching is doing the calculations theoretically for your optics setup, such that the cavity mode is coupled to the mode of the laser. Which is, I would say, I would say an advanced undergraduate optics kind of problem. Um, yeah. Um, um, yeah, and then of course with lasers you have these mirrors, and so the sort of um, angle of the face of the mirror is like, finely tuned in sort of 2 degrees of freedom, and so you have all that nuance as well. And I did some of that as well with the whole laser setup, um, and lab wiring, and a slew of other things. So yeah, and so other than that quantum computing paper where I'm not a writer but mentioned in the acknowledgements as the person who suggested the collaboration, I became a McNair Scholar, in which my own authorship was my work with the Portland State Aerospace Society, in which I did multidisciplinary design optimization, which is basically where you are theoretically optimizing the design of something. It could be a car, it could be a rocket, and so you have a design vector and you have a set of constraints. Those constraints could be uh, design constraints, or they could be performance constraints. And so in this case, what I optimized was Launch Vehicle 4, which is the 4th iteration of their student-built rocket, in which there were design constraints like, we can't make an engine more powerful than 10 kilonewtons. That's infeasible for our engineering team to do. And then performance constraints are, we want an apogee of above 95 kilometers. And so basically I contributed to the open source code, and converged on an ideal design vector for the rocket, including parameters for the fins, like the fin sweep, the span, the root chord, all the parameters for the fins, and then as well, I think the aerodynamic simulator aspect of the optimizer was running OpenRocket, and so that's my own authorship, which is published in the Oregon Undergraduate Research Journal. Detailing all of that technical work. And so I've also, let's say somewhere in the range of let's see, somewhere in the range of January 2023 and March 2023, I was, or I got accepted into the graduate school at Northwestern University for a Master of Science in Electrical Engineering. And so if you look at the engineering grad school rankings, Stanford is number 2, MIT is number 1, Northwestern is number 16. And so, effectively, I got into a top 20 engineering grad school program, and that was initially to start in fall of 2023, but I've deferred it twice now to this coming September 2025, because when you get into a competitive grad school, the harder problem is how you're going to fund it. You then would have to get a competitive fellowship or scholarship, or have your credit be in good enough of a position to secure graduate school loans. And so, yeah, I really want to attend this September, and I have more problems to solve in relation to making that a reality. But getting in, is still, indicative of all I've done in my undergrad and so on. The game does get harder, and so I still consider myself a technical baby. I have so much more to learn. So, yeah. Um, um, so, um, so I talked about the physics I did in my undergrad, but of course I also did a computer science minor, and so this involved coursework in Python, C, data structures, algorithms, and also an introductory AI course where I learned about depth and breadth first search, and minimax, and alpha beta pruning, and reinforcement learning, different AI algorithms that are at the advanced undergraduate level, in which I implemented them in Python. And the fun project was to implement a Pac-Man agent with different AI algorithms, of which I did one with minimax, did one with must be alpha beta pruning, and also reinforcement learning. So it's all quite abstract, but alpha beta pruning is like a tree-like approach, and so it's like you're pruning a tree, but the tree is in abstract computer science sort of notion. So yeah. So yeah, and then in my math major, I proved calculus from 13 properties of numbers through limits, derivatives, upper and lower sums, to integrals, to infinite series, to Taylor series. All of that can be proved from 13 properties of numbers. Um, so, yeah. And so that was the knowledge. Um, so, um, and then, of course, I had mentioned I did multivariable calculus and linear algebra. Then I did Fourier analysis, which is basically any function can be represented as a weighted sum of sinusoidal functions. And then applications of it in the 2D wave equation, the 2D heat equation, ultimately solving differential equations with Fourier techniques. Right? And so the first course in the sequence, I was that one annoying person where on the first midterm it's out of 16, but there's a bonus question. And so I got the highest grade in the class. I was the person that got 16 and a half out of 16 because I'd solved the proof that was the bonus question as well. Because I'm the Deus Ex Machina. So, so anyway, so and then I did complex analysis, which is stuff like contour integrals, and dealing with complex arithmetic, theorems relevant to evaluating contour integrals, which is where you're integrating over some contour in the complex plane. And so you have theorems to deal with contour integrals in which there are singularities or points where the function is undefined. And I did all that as well, yes. And so that ends up being relevant to some stuff in quantum mechanics, which I did in my physics, as I said already. Yeah. And so I would say as well that the main programming languages right now I've done coursework in have been Python and C, but I'm self-studying C++, going through Bjarne Stroustrup C++ programming language, because it's similar enough to C and in some ways more elegant, which is why the Tesla FSD computer is running C++ instead of C. So yeah, and then I don't know much about front-end software engineering, and so I have more to learn there. So long story short, I would like to learn maximally about electrical engineering, computer science, and physics. And I would call myself a technologist. So anyway, since graduation I've done many technical jobs, and I won't go into all that detail. And so I've been renting a condo and leasing a Tesla since roughly July of 2024. And then the hope to attend the Northwestern Electrical Engineering Master's program I got into come September of this year of 2025. I'm a Jamaican immigrant. I'm a citizen. And let's say by the end of this month of March, or definitely by the middle of April, I'll also have a US passport. Uh, and so I've come from a relatively humble situation in Jamaica with a single mother. Um, and when I really put my mind to it back in Jamaica about October of 2018, I got a 1520 out of 1600 on the SAT, and I said, well, I'm in the top 1 percentile. I'm just this Jamaican kid who wants to do epic tech stuff in America. And then November 2018 came the 800s in mathematics level 2 and physics subject tests. So, so, uh, so, yeah. Um, yes. Um, yeah. Um, yeah. Um, Taxes. Um, so I said I was 24, and so, um, and I've, been building my life, and so my adjusted gross income uh, last year was only roughly $35,000. Uh, but this was the first year in which I really had a significant tax payment. And so I roughly had $3,000 in um, state and federal taxes um, that I paid off recently, and so I'm just getting a sense of that. I paid it in one big sum, and it was kind of like a big blow, and so I'm financially tighter now. But I think that with what Doge is doing with ensuring taxpayer dollars are being spent on worthwhile things and not wasted is good. And so, yeah. 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 And so as I study and do more unpaid internships or even boot camps in computer science, which is another one of my skills, I could also try and land a good computer science job. But then, of course, the grad program I got into was electrical engineering. Long story short, I'm a technologist who has much to learn. But I want to turn a hopeless situation into a happy ending. Thank you. This is Deus Ex Machina. Well, actually, a final thing I'd like to touch on. Recently, there was a Muslim fellow who had joined the U.S. Armed Forces and had gained American trust, but recently got a truck and crashed it and killed people as an act of terrorism. And so in the Middle East, they'll say, Inshallah, I'll find my way. And so they have their own notions of a benevolent force in the universe. And so the two delusions in American Christianity and in Allah of the Middle East, they can conflict because in some ways American military presence in the Middle East and so on they don't like that. And so a long time ago, there was a naval ship in the Middle East, and then, or actually near Africa, and then some folks drove up in a speedboat and sort of activated a bomb that destroyed the infrastructure of the ship and killed people. And they're suicide bombers for Allah, because American military presence there is hubris, and they say they will sacrifice themselves for Allah because the Americans and their technology, they are full of hubris, and this is our turf. And so what are they doing here? Meanwhile, in America, as a result of the pressure applied on the external world, in part due to the military, has a bunch of privileged people who want to travel around the world like kings, while the country wastes 40% of the food it's producing, while people, devout Christians, think that there's something benevolent blessing their life, and so on and so forth. This is actually the truth. So, anyway, there's enough to go around. Human nature and hubris is the source of many problems. There do not have to be people sleeping on the sidewalk, and there do not have to be mansions worth millions of dollars that only a few people own. It's all warped because of human nature and wanting of more, and then you perish. So there's not an afterlife. That is also delusion. So yeah. Yeah. I am the Deus Ex Machina.